So a couple of weeks ago I mentioned briefly about being a one-man band and doing all the work for my videos myself. And by the way, I must say an absolutely huge thank you to all those of you who very kindly subscribed to the channel after that video. I was a bit overwhelmed by the response actually, but extremely grateful for your support. Anyway, quite a few of you commented saying that you'd be interested to see a follow-up video that explains the process I use to get from initial video idea to finished product posted here on YouTube. So, this is that video. Hello and welcome to Just Have a Think. So this is going to be a fairly brief overview of each stage in a typical working week for me, literally starting where we are now in my office on a Monday morning. At this stage, I've usually already researched 10 potential video topics and posted them in a content poll for Patreon supporters to vote on. And if you're wondering where I get those ideas from, well, I've got paid subscriptions to all these organisations, including things like the Financial Times, which you might have thought would be anathema to me, but actually they know where all the money is and they're pretty good at following the trail. So they're a surprisingly useful resource, as are Bloomberg. And of course the science journals are a must as well. I also get daily news headlines in my Google feed, which has algorithmically tailored itself to bring me all things climate and sustainable energy related on a daily basis. So I usually end up with a screen crammed full of tabs that I have to read, and I apply 3 very simple criteria for a story to go into the content poll. Most importantly in this day and age, it has to be real. So a bit of cross-checking is usually required there. It also has to be relevant, by which I mean the subject matter has to be within the parameters of what my channel does, otherwise the dear old YouTube algorithm gets a bit confused and simply doesn't bother to show it to anyone. And last but not least, it has to be something that I think is relatable to you, the audience, so that you hopefully find the video watchable and informative. Right, so the patrons have cast their vote and I've chosen a topic to work on, and then the rest of Monday and most of Tuesday, to be honest, is taken up with actually trying to write the script. And it's at this point where if I had any hair left, I'd usually be trying to tear it out most weeks, because finding a way to start a script is really the hardest part of the process for me. It can sometimes take a whole day just to write an opening paragraph that I'm happy with. And if I'm covering a scientific research paper, especially for stuff like battery chemistries, it can be a bit like doing a miniature degree course each week with abbreviations and equations and language that I've never seen before and often have to look up so I can properly understand it and translate it into normal everyday English for you guys. I do always get there in the end though, so then when I've got a finished script, it's on to filming my piece in front of camera. So my studio, for want of a better word, is literally my living room. Every week it gets converted from a lounge TV room into the backdrop that you guys will no doubt all recognise. That means setting up several lights, switching on a 13-year-old Mac that I'll be honest doesn't get used for any other purpose nowadays, setting up a microphone and checking the sound recorder, the camera focus and all that stuff. It usually takes about an hour to get a 12-minute script in the can. And here's where the fun starts, or the hard labour, depending on how you look at it. It is of course the editing process. I use Adobe's Creative Cloud software for all my post-production stuff. And that means predominantly Acrobat, Photoshop, Premiere Pro, After Effects and Media Encoder. I use Premiere Pro for the main video timeline. That's the software that will output the final finished video. First thing to do here is to drop in the piece that I just filmed to camera, including all the stuff that I messed up on. And then I run through all that footage to remove all the outtakes and splice the remaining sections together as neatly as possible, even down to the level of a single frame, so that you don't hear jerky transitions or truncated breaths or any of that stuff. It is surprising what the human ear subconsciously picks up on, especially if you're listening with earphones. So I take quite a bit of time to try and get this right. Once that's done, it's time to add in all the spangly stuff that takes a rather flat piece of oratory from me and makes it into the slightly more interesting videos that you watch each week. And that's where Adobe Acrobat, Photoshop and After Effects come into play. I use Photoshop for things like removing backgrounds from images or jiggling web pages around a bit so they fit better on the screen, or just tidying up slightly messy pictures or whatever it may be. Photoshop is basically stage 1 for any static images that I'll be using in the video. For so-called B-roll, moving images, I either use royalty-free stock footage that you can find online, or if I use footage from other people's videos, I always credit the source in the bottom right hand side of the screen and limit it to no more than 30 seconds, which is a rough rule of thumb, is generally accepted as fair use. If I need to do any animating, which I almost always do, then that all happens in After Effects. I've set up a few templates over the years for some of the stuff you see most often, like this one for animating pages of a report or a scientific paper. I convert each page of a relevant document into a standard size JPEG in Photoshop, and then drop all those JPEGs into After Effects and make each one into its own composition. And it gets a bit geeky here, but bear with me. Making each page into a separate composition allows me to animate stuff on that page, like the highlighter lines that go over text, or reconstruct static diagrams into animated versions that are more interesting for a video format. Then I can drop all those pre-compositions into a second composition to arrange them how I want them, before dropping that composition into a final comp that I've already set up with a virtual camera and spotlights. I can then move the virtual camera around the scene to create all those smooth transitions that you see in the finished product. There are actually lots of different ways to do this kind of thing in After Effects, and no doubt there will be motion graphics experts out there who would do it differently. But this is the way I've got used to, so that's what I'm sticking with. For other types of animation, like the battery chemistry stuff, or animating how a factory process works or whatever, I'm pretty much working from scratch. I try to find an already existing representative image online somewhere and then use that as the basis for my composition. Adobe also provides a subscription image service called iStock, where I find lots of good stuff to get me started. And then once the basic drawing is complete, I start the really very time-consuming process of animating it all to match the timings that I now have from my piece to camera and which I've annotated on the script. I won't drill down too much into that process. Suffice to say, depending on complexity, it can often take half a day or more to produce just 1 minute of animation. It's not a process for everyone, I realise that, but I'm a pretty creative sort of a soul, and I really do enjoy the tangible nature of creating something that never existed before. Anyway, once I'm happy with an animation, I send it to Media Encoder to be rendered into an MP4 file that can then be dropped onto the main timeline back in Premiere Pro. And then when all that's done, I add the bits and bobs like the subscribe and Patreon logos and the end screen and that little bit of music that you hear at the end of each video, and render all of that into the final video that I can upload to YouTube, where I add a thumbnail which I've created in Photoshop, plus a manually uploaded transcript so that the subtitles actually match the speech, a description section with all the reference links, and the end screen icons for subscribing and linking out to Patreon. And that is pretty much it, folks. It's definitely a week's work, that's for sure. Sometimes quite a long week's work, in fact. But I consider myself extremely fortunate to be able to do it, and as you've probably spotted, I'm pretty passionate about the subject matter, and I'm incredibly grateful that the support from like-minded individuals all over the world has enabled me to make it my full-time career without ever having to take corporate sponsorship money or rely on the vagaries of YouTube's slightly bizarre monetization system. So I hope that's given you a bit of insight into what I get up to. Thanks for watching, have a great week, and remember to just have a think. Cheers.